Erev Shabbos. How's everybody doing? Great to be learning with you on a Friday. I am fighting off a bit of a cold, so I apologize if I sound stuffy. Excuse me. Gordo in Scotland, Bill in Missouri, Shandora in the Bronx, Bella in Florida, Karen in Northern California, John in Maine, Joseph in Massachusetts, Ella's in the house, Joe in the Inland Empire. Let's get through it so I can have some tea and some chicken soup. Okay, we are working our way through Chapter 6 here in Tractate Bava Kamma, the 21st volume of the Talmud, continuing our discussion of Mishnah number 1, which is all about what is an adequate degree of safeguarding. Generally, we're talking about you have to safeguard your animal from getting out and eating or trampling on the property of another person. So if you took reasonable precautions to stop it from doing that, then at least according to some opinions, you are exempt from liability. And now that we've started talking about safeguarding and what is the obligation of safeguarding, we're doing some related topics. So we pick this up at the bottom of page 56b. It was stated that there is a dispute between Amoraim, the sages of the Gemara period, that there is a dispute when Amoraim it was stated that there is a dispute between Amoraim concerning the following issue. With regard to one who is safeguarding a lost item that he has not yet returned, what level of responsibility does he bear? Now, this is a fascinating question. So it's a mitzvah, a commandment, to return a lost object, right? You have to make reasonable efforts to return a lost object. If there's exceptions to this, if there's no way to return it because there's no identifying marks, if it's a situation where for sure the owner has despaired of ever getting it back, that's another situation. But where there's a reasonable expectation that it is possible to return the lost item, well then, until you get the opportunity to return it, you have to safeguard that item. And what are your responsibilities in terms of safeguarding it? I mean, you're being a good person, right? You're going to extend yourself to return this lost item. But maybe you can't do it right away. So while it's in your possession, what if something happens to it? What if it's damaged? What if it breaks? What if it's an animal and it escapes from you? What if it's stolen from you? Do you actually bear responsibility when all you were trying to do was to do the good deed, so to speak, of returning it? Now, let's remember that mitzvah, which is often translated as good deed, kind of in secular English-speaking culture, that is not a correct translation. It is good to fulfill a mitzvah, but a mitzvah is a commandment, right? So you are commanded, a Jew is commanded to return a lost item. And until you're able to do that, you do bear some responsibility to safeguard it while it's in your possession. The question is, how much, right? At what level of responsibility are you sitting? Are you like somebody who rented the item, like somebody who's getting paid to watch the item, like somebody who borrowed the item, or like somebody who was asked to watch the item without getting paid for it? The sages will debate. So, what level of responsibility does he bear while he is safeguarding the lost item that he has not yet returned? So Rabba said he is considered to be like an unpaid bailee, somebody who's asked to watch the item without getting paid for it. And Rav Yosef said he is considered like a paid bailee. He's not getting paid, so how can you say that he's like a paid bailee? And what this argument is going to turn on is whether you receive some benefit when you are in the act of returning a lost item. And we're not talking about getting a reward for when you return it, but rather that there is some benefit to you simply because you're engaged in the mitzvah of returning the lost item. So this discussion between Rabba and Rav Yosef is going to occupy some time. So their respective opinions are explained. Rabba said that the one who is safeguarding the lost item is considered to be like an unpaid bailee. So intuitively, that makes sense, right? An unpaid bailee is somebody who's watching your property for you, but he's not getting paid, right? You haven't paid him to watch your property the way you would pay a shepherd to watch your sheep. He's doing you a favor. So you would think there's definitely decreased responsibility for safeguarding. And maybe that would make sense for somebody who is in the act of returning something that you lost. How much responsibility should he have? So let's explain the respective opinions. Rabba said that he is considered like an unpaid bailee because when benefit comes to him, because what benefit comes to him through safeguarding it? He's not getting paid. He doesn't get a benefit. So of course he's like an unpaid bailee, according to Rabba. Therefore, he is just like any unpaid bailee, and his level of responsibility is like an unpaid bailee, which is kind of the lowest because he's doing you a favor by watching it. Rav Yosef disagrees and says that the one who's safeguarding the lost item is considered to be like a paid bailee on account of the benefit that he is not required to give bread to a poor person while he is looking after the lost item, because one who is engaged in one positive mitzvah is exempt from performing another positive mitzvah. Consequently, since there is some benefit involved in looking after the lost item, he is considered to be like a paid bailee. Right? So generally speaking, when you're negative mitzvahs are the things that thou shalt not. You're always obligated in the thou shalt not. But when you are in the midst of performing a positive commandment, thou shalt do this, then you're exempt from performing other positive mitzvahs unless the other positive mitzvah doesn't cost you any additional effort at all. So for example, it's a positive mitzvah to wear tzitzis, which I'm wearing under my shirt. So I'm not excused from wearing tzitzis while I'm engaged in returning a lost item. But I am excused from giving charity, as we just read, which is also a positive commandment, to give charity, to give bread to a poor person, or to tithe 10% of our income. So I'm excused from doing that while I'm in the act of returning a lost item. Now, does that mean that the entire time that I'm holding on to somebody's lost item so that I can return it to him later, that I'm excused from all positive mitzvahs? No, only when I'm literally involved in safeguarding the item, because I'm out there like feeding the animal that I'm taking care of until I can return the lost item, or I'm walking the animal back to give it to its owner. Then I'm directly engaged in the mitzvah of returning the lost item. And while I'm doing that, I am excused from other positive mitzvahs during that time, unless they require no further effort. So this is one interpretation, right? So remember, Rabba says returning a lost item is like an unpaid bailee. Rav Yosef says he is like a paid bailee because he gets some benefit in that he's excused from doing other positive mitzvahs when he's directly involved in returning the lost item. This is one interpretation. Whereas there are those who explain this differently. They say Rav Yosef said that he is considered to be like a paid bailee. Once the merciful one obligates him against his will to look after lost items, because it's a commandment, the Torah presumably imposes the high standard of safeguarding on him. Therefore, he is considered like a paid bailee. Not because he receives a benefit that he's excused from doing other positive mitzvahs, but rather because the Torah obligates you to return a lost item. And likewise, the Torah obligates you to return the lost item intact. And that's why you bear the responsibility level of a paid bailee. Now, the Gemara presents a mnemonic device for the laws which are coming, which maybe makes more sense in Aramaic, but it's like this: he returned it, always returned, chiyah, you say, breaks payment. And these are just chapter headings of what's coming up. So Rav Yosef raised an objection to the opinion of Rabba from that which is taught in a baraisa. Now we're on 57a. If one found a lost item and he returned it to a place where its owner will see it, he is no longer responsible to deal with it. If the item was stolen or lost, the finder bears financial responsibility to compensate for the loss. Let's read that again. If one found a lost item and he returned it to a place where the owner will see it. So he returned it. He didn't give it right into the hand of the owner, but he put it where the owner is surely going to see it. So then he is no longer responsible to deal with it. If the item was stolen or lost, the finder bears financial responsibility to compensate for the loss. But didn't you just say he returned it? Once you put it in a place where the owner can find it, you don't have to deal with it anymore. So why, if it's stolen at that point, does the finder who returned it bear financial responsibility? This seems to be contradictory. So Rav Yosef states his objection. What is meant by the expression was stolen or lost? Does it not mean that it was stolen from the finder's house or lost from his house before he returned it? Since he is liable for theft or loss, it appears that he has the same status of a paid bailee. This would be a proof that Rav Yosef's view that a finder, before he returns the lost item, has the responsibility level of a paid bailee. This would seem to be evidence for that. Rabba rejects this challenge. What are you talking about? This baraisa that you just mentioned does not say what you said it says. No, it means that it means the baraisa is discussing a case where it was stolen or lost from the place where the finder returned it, in which case even an unpaid bailee is liable on the grounds of negligence. In other words, well, you tried to return it, but you left it in a place that was totally insecure. So maybe the owner was going to walk by it, but in the meantime, 100 other people are going to walk by that, and it's very possible that one of them will take it. And so you did not return the item properly, and that's why you have financial responsibility. And we can't learn out from that the finder is considered to be like a paid bailee or an unpaid bailee. Either way, this person was negligent when he returned it in an insecure location. But Rav Yosef has an argument. He says to Rabba, but the baraisa teaches that the finder is no longer responsible to deal with it, indicating that failing to deal with it is not negligence, and the finder has no further responsibility for it. Why did you say it's a case where you return it to an insecure location? He returned it to a place where the owner will for sure see it. Who brought in anything about insecure location? So Rabba says to Rav Yosef, with what are we dealing here? At the end of the baraisa, where it teaches that the finder is liable, we are dealing with a case where he returned it at midday, which is a time when the owner of the lost item is not typically present. Okay, people go to work during the day. You left it in front of his house when it was foreseeable and likely that no one was going to be there to receive it, for another 8 hours until the owner comes home from work. What kind of returning is that? We know that there are porch pirates, porch bandits, porch thieves, porch robbers, right? All people stealing all kinds of stuff. You can't just leave somebody's property that you have a responsibility to return to him by leaving it in front of his house where anybody could come along and take it. And midday is not a time when we expect to find the owner home, and we don't expect that he'll be home anytime soon. So that's why the person is liable. And the baraisa is teaching two separate laws. And this is what the baraisa is teaching. If the finder returned it in the morning, when people typically are present, and to a place where the owner of the lost item will see it, and the owner typically enters and exits, and it is likely that he will see it, then the finder is no longer responsible to deal with it, nor does he bear responsibility if it is then stolen or lost. By contrast, if the finder returned it at midday to a place where the owner will see it, since it is a time when the owner does not typically enter and exit, and so he will not see it, if it is then stolen or lost, the finder does bear financial responsibility for the loss. So Rav Yosef again raises an objection to the opinion of Rabba from that which is taught in the continuation of the same baraisa. The finder of the lost item always bears responsibility if the item is stolen or lost until he returns it to the owner's property. Now, what does the word always add? Is it not teaching that even if the lost item was stolen from the finder's house, he is liable? If so, learn from this that one who finds a lost item is considered like a paid bailee. Because if you pay somebody to watch your stuff and then it gets stolen from him, so he bears responsibility. He was getting paid to guard your property against theft and loss. So that it's not an excuse that it got stolen from him. He has to pay, he has to reimburse you for the value of what you paid him to watch, and he failed to protect from being stolen. And now that this Baraisa seems to be saying, according to Rav Yosef, that one who finds a lost item and is safeguarding it until he's able to return it to the owner, if it gets stolen from him, he's going to be like a paid bailee, and that he bears financial responsibility. Whoa, you're telling me that if I find something and I want to return it, and in the meantime, until I get a chance to return it, it's in my house, and it gets stolen from my house, that now I owe money to the owner of the property that I was trying to, return it for him after I found it? Really? Let's see. Certainly not so simple. Rabba answers Rav Yosef. I concede to you in a case of one looking after lost animals that he is liable if they are stolen or lost. And the reason is that since the animals have already taken to the habit of walking out of their usual path and not behaving in their typical manner, they require extra safeguarding, corresponding to that required of a paid bailee. But with regard to other items that are lost, inanimate objects that do not move by themselves, the finder bears no greater responsibility to secure them than does an unpaid bailee. And so if they're stolen from my house before I have a chance to return the lost item, I'm not financially responsible for that, just like an unpaid bailee is not responsible for that. And that's why Rabba says one safeguarding a lost object before he can return it is like an unpaid bailee. What will Rav Yosef say? Because they require, then does an unpaid bailee. And Rabba raises a further objection to the opinion of Rav Yosef. The verse states, in the context of returning lost items, return them. Even this morning, I did not have as much of a runny nose and a cold as I do right now. Thank God Shabbos is coming. I'm feeling like this is a Shabbos to lay low. Okay, so Rabba raises a further objection to the opinion of Rav Yosef. The verse states in the context of returning lost items, return them. This is Deuteronomy 22:1. Repeating the verb, hashev teshivim, right? Indeed, you shall return them. So the sages expounded this as follows. From the first word, hashev, I have derived only that one may return the item to the house of the owner of the lost article. From where do I derive that even if one returns it to his garden or to his ruin, meaning an unused structure on his property, that the finder has discharged his obligation and is no longer responsible for the item that he found? For this, the verse states, teshivem, repeating the verb for emphasis to teach that the finder fulfills the mitzvah by returning the item to any place that belongs to the owner. So according to this, says Rabbah, all I have to do to discharge my obligation to return a lost item is to deposit it on the property of the owner. Forget it. We're not talking about whether he's there or not. I just got to put it on his property. Now, if it's an animal, I have increased responsibility. But if we're just talking about an inanimate object, all I have to do is deposit it on his property, and my obligation is complete. And what is the meaning of the phrase in the Baraisa, to his garden or to his ruin? If we say that the finder returned the lost item to the garden of the owner that is secured, i.e. properly enclosed, or to his ruin that is secured, it would be unnecessary to state this, as it is the same as his house, since these spaces are secured in the same way as his house. Rather, it is obvious that it means that the finder returned the lost item to the owner's garden that is not secured, or to his ruin that is not secured. And nevertheless, the finder is no longer liable for subsequent damage or theft of the found item, and conclude from it that a finder is like an unpaid bailee in terms of his liabilities, and this reduced level of safeguarding when returning the item is sufficient. So Rob is saying, I proved it to you. The finder is like an unpaid bailee. I disagree, and I have proved my point. He is not like a paid bailee in his level of responsibility to safeguard the lost item before he returns it. Rav Yosef is not done. Rav Yosef says to Rabba, actually, one can explain that the Baraisa is referring to a case where the finder placed it in the owner's garden that is secured, or his ruin that is secured. And with regard to that which poses a difficulty for you, that this is the same as his house, there is nevertheless a novelty in this ruling. And this teaches us that in this case, we do not require the owner's knowledge that the article has been returned. And this is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Elazar. As Rabbi Elazar says, all those who are obligated to return items to their owners, for example, a bailee or a thief, right? A thief, if he's going to try to, write the accounting of his life, as it were, and make up for the sin that he committed when he stole, he has an obligation to return what he stole and actually double, right? He has to return double the value of what he stole because he stole it and inconvenienced the owner. But, so maybe not so many thieves will do that, but maybe a thief who wants to make an atonement will. So, all these people, so Rabbi Elazar is talking about all those who are obligated to return items to their owners, whether they are a bailee, paid or unpaid, or a thief, they require the owner's knowledge that they are returning it, except for one fulfilling the mitzvah of returning a lost item. So according to Rabbi Elazar, a thief who returns property or a bailee who returns property, they have to make the owner of that property aware that it's been returned to them. But one who is simply returning a lost item doesn't have to go to that much trouble. He can just deposit that object on the owner's property. We haven't really settled yet whether it needs to be secure in that person's property. But he doesn't have to make the owner aware that he has returned it. And this is because the Torah included many permitted ways of returning lost items by employing the double expression, hashev teshivim, right? Return, indeed you shall return, which serves to permit the return of the lost item without the knowledge of the owner. Okay, so far it's been Rabba arguing with Rav Yosef. Now Abaye is going to get into the conversation. Abaye said to Rav Yosef, and you, do you not hold that one safeguarding a lost item is like an unpaid bailee? Well, so far he hasn't. That was Rabba's point of view, not Rav Yosef's. But doesn't Rabbi Hiya bar Abba say that Rabbi Yochanan says, with regard to one who finds a lost item but falsely states the claim that a thief stole the item from him and takes an oath to that effect, and now he's going to either get caught or make an atonement for it, right? He must pay a double payment, i.e. twice the value of the item. Right, so somebody found a lost item, and then, the owner is told, oh, so-and-so found your lost item. And so the owner goes to so-and-so, says, great, I heard you found my lost item. And the guy who found it says, yeah, I did find it, but it was stolen from me. And he's lying, right? He's lying. And then the owner says, well, then swear that it was stolen from you. And he swears. So now, he told the lie and he swore that he was telling the truth when he was lying, that it had been stolen from him. And then it all comes out what he did, right? So now the finder didn't return the lost object, claimed it was stolen, and swore that that was the case. And then it comes out that that was all a lie. So now what position is this finder who became a liar and a false oath taker in? Sounds like he's going to be in this, it's going to be as if he stole it, right? Because he swore that it had been stolen from him. Now he's going to stand in the shoes of a thief who needs to make a double payment to make restitution for the crime that he committed. Right, so let's read that again. Abaye is challenging Rav Yosef, and he says, doesn't Rabbi Chia bar Abba say that Rabbi Yochanan says, with regard to one who finds a lost item, but falsely states the claim that a thief stole the item from him, and he takes an oath to that effect, so he must pay a double payment, which is twice the value of the item, and that's the usual punishment, as it were, fine of the thief. And if it enters your mind that the finder of a lost item is considered to have the same status as a paid bailee, why in such a case must he pay a double payment? He should be required to pay only the principal. Why? Because a paid bailee is liable in any event if the article is stolen or lost. And he did not stand to benefit from the claim that the item was stolen. If we're going to say that one who finds a lost item has the same obligations as a paid bailee, why would he bother to make the claim that it was stolen from him? He could just say, it's lost, and he's going to owe the value of the item. If he's an unpaid bailee, that's why he would claim that it was stolen, because if it was stolen from an unpaid bailee, then he doesn't have to compensate the owner for it. So what's Rav Yosef going to say to this? So in other words, Abaye is saying to Rav Yosef, and this is further evidence that Rabba is right, and the finder of a lost item is like an unpaid bailee, not a paid bailee. So Rav Yosef said to him, with what are we dealing here? It is a case where the finder took a false oath stating the claim that the deposit was taken not by a thief, but by an armed bandit. And in such a case, even a paid bailee is exempt. Consequently, his claim would have absolved him from liability, and if the item is subsequently found in his possession, he is liable to pay double for his false claim that it was stolen. So, what's the difference between a thief and an armed bandit? The outcome is different because for a paid bailee, he has to prevent, he is being paid to prevent thieves from coming in, breaking into his house, or breaking into the safe, breaking into whatever is the storage facility, which the paid bailee is being paid to guard. And then if the thief comes in surreptitiously and removes the object, the paid bailee has to make good on that because that's exactly what he was being paid to prevent. And if we say that the finder of a lost item is like a paid bailee, he would also have the same responsibility. On the other hand, if an armed bandit comes, right, with a gun and says, give me that item, then even a paid bailee is absolved from responsibility because those are circumstances beyond his control. The armed bandit is a much more difficult thing to deal with than the thief. And that's why the paid bailee has a different outcome if he's robbed by a thief versus an armed bandit. So Abaye says to Rav Yosef, but an armed bandit has the status of a robber and not a thief. So according to this explanation, why did Rabbi Yochanan state that it was stolen by a thief? Rabbi Yochanan, in his explanation about this paid bailee, was talking about that a thief took it, and that's why he falsely claimed, that a thief took it. Now Abaye is saying, well, wait a minute. An armed bandit is not like a thief. An armed bandit is like a robber. What's a robber? So a robber is somebody who doesn't come in surreptitiously behind your back when you're not looking. It's somebody who comes up and says, I'm going to punch you in the face unless you give me your wallet. Right? That's a robber. And that's distinct from an armed bandit. How? Only in that the armed bandit, has a weapon. I guess the robber in this situation is not armed. But he's doing it in your face. He's not doing it surreptitiously. So Rav Yosef says to Abaye, the reason that only a thief pays the double payment and not a robber is that a thief denigrates God by exhibiting fear of people, since he steals surreptitiously, while not exhibiting fear of heaven. And this is in contrast to a robber who robs openly. He knows that God sees what he's doing, and he knows that people see what he's doing, and he robs anyway. Accordingly, the reason that I say that an armed bandit is considered like a thief is since he hides from people rather than stealing openly. Although he in fact does steal openly, since he does so by employing a weapon, he also exhibits fear of people and is akin to a thief. Therefore, armed bandits are liable to pay a double payment like a thief. And the claim that the deposit was seized by armed bandits is considered to be the same as a claim that it was stolen by thieves. Consequently, since a paid bailee is absolved by means of such a claim, if it is determined that his claim was false, he must pay double. Abaye raised an objection to the opinion of Rav Yosef from that which is taught in a baraisa, different baraisa. Now we're on page 57b. No, if you say that this is the law with regard to an unpaid bailee who pays a double payment, shall you also say that this is the case with regard to a paid bailee who does not pay a double payment? And now Abaye explains his objection. And if it enters your mind to say that an armed bandit is considered like a thief, it turns out that there is a case where a paid bailee pays a double payment, and it is when he states the claim that the deposit was taken by an armed bandit. And Rav Yosef said to him, this is what that baraisa is saying. No. If you say that this is the law with regard to an unpaid bailee who pays a double payment for any claim that he makes concerning the theft of the item if he is subsequently found to be lying, shall you also say that this is the case with regard to a paid bailee who pays a double payment for a false claim only when he states the claim that the deposit was taken by an armed bandit? In other words, a paid bailee, if it's stolen from him by a thief, right? He is just going to have to make good. He doesn't have to make a double payment. But if he falsely states, right, he swears a false oath that it was taken by a thief, which is odd, right? Because what does he gain? If he says it was taken from me by a thief and he's a paid bailee, he doesn't gain anything. An unpaid bailee would, but a paid bailee would not. Abaye raised an objection to the opinion of Rav Yosef from that which is taught in yet another baraisa. The Torah states with regard to a case where one borrows an object or an animal from another. Okay, now we're talking about a borrower. And it breaks or dies, he shall pay restitution. Now that's Exodus 22:13. Now the borrower has the greatest responsibility, right? He was asking for a favor. Like at least an unpaid bailee, you're not paying him, but you're still asking him to do you a favor by watching the stuff. The borrower is asking you for the favor, right? He's saying, can I borrow your stuff? So the borrower has the greatest responsibility. If it's stolen from him, whether by a thief or a bandit, and even if it breaks while it's in his care, or if it's an animal that dies while it's in his care, since he borrowed it, he is responsible to restore what he borrowed. Now, from this verse, Exodus 22:13, I've derived only that the borrower is liable in a case where the object breaks or the animal dies. From where do I derive that he is liable if it was stolen or lost? Well, you can state the following kal v'chomer inference. And just as a paid bailee, whom the Torah rendered exempt in a case where the item breaks or dies, is nevertheless liable for a case of theft or loss, then, with regard to a borrower who is liable, even if the item breaks or the animal dies, is it not logical that he is liable for theft or loss? And this is a kal v'chomer inference that has no refutation. And if it enters your mind to say that an armed bandit is considered like a thief, why is this an argument that has no refutation? It can be refuted as follows. What is notable about a paid bailee? He is notable in that he pays double payment if he states the claim that the deposit was taken by an armed bandit, whereas a borrower does not pay double in such a case but only the principal amount. And Rav Yosef said to him, this Tana, this sage from the Mishnaic period, holds that the requirement of a borrower to pay the principal without having the option to exempt himself by taking an oath is stricter than the requirement of a paid bailee to pay the double payment when claiming that it was stolen by an armed bandit, as this obligation is in effect only where he took an oath. Therefore, this doubled payment pertaining to a paid bailee cannot be used as a refutation of the Kal V'chomer inference. So the Gemara asks, let us say that the following Baraisa supports Rav Yosef's opinion. In the case of one who rents a cow from another person and the cow is stolen, and this renter says, I will pay for it, and I am not taking an oath that the cow was stolen, since I do not wish to take an oath. And afterward, the thief is found. So then the thief pays the double payment to the renter and not to the owner, right? Because the guy rented the cow. It was stolen from him. He could have got out of all responsibility by swearing an oath that it was stolen from him, but he doesn't want to swear an oath because oaths are problematic, and you can make a mistake when you swear an oath, and then you could be liable, in the view of heaven. And so a lot of people don't want to take an oath. He'd rather just pay for it. Okay, it was stolen from me. I'm not really responsible, but maybe I should have watched it better. I don't want to take an oath. I'll just pay you. Then they find the thief. So the thief, has to make restitution, has to pay double what he stole. But who does he owe it to? The owner? Well, the owner had a cow rented, and then the renter paid him for the cow. The renter took that obligation on himself, and so therefore now he's in the place of the owner with respect to the thief. The thief, who now has to make double restitution, pays the renter, who didn't want to swear an oath and therefore paid the owner. The owner's already been made whole. So the thief, who stole from the renter, has to make a double payment to the renter. Makes sense. Now the Gemara notes the sages who sought to use that baraisa to support Rav Yosef's opinion assume that the baraisa is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, who says a renter is like a paid bailee and is liable for theft or loss. But from the fact that it teaches, and he said, I will pay for it, and I am not taking an oath that the cow was stolen, one can learn by inference that if the renter wants, he can exempt himself from payment by taking an oath. And the Gemara clarifies, what are the circumstances? Is it not a case where the renter states a claim that the item was taken by an armed bandit, in which case, as a paid bailee, he does not bear liability? And despite this, the Baraisa teaches, and if afterward the thief was found, the thief pays the double payment to the renter. Conclude from it that an armed bandit is considered like a thief. Now the Gemara says in rejection of this proof, sorry. And the Gemara says in rejection of this proof, do you maintain that this baraisa is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, who says that a renter is considered like a paid bailee? Perhaps this Tana holds in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir, who says that a renter is considered like an unpaid bailee. So it's a similar dispute over who is like a paid bailee and who is like an unpaid bailee. We were talking about the finder of a lost object. Now we're finding that there's a dispute about who is like a paid bailee or an unpaid bailee with respect to a renter. But this debate is not between Rabba and Rav Yosef or Abaye and Rav Yosef. This one is between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir. So Rabbi Meir says that a renter is considered like an unpaid bailee. And on account of that, he's absolved of responsibility even if he claimed it was a regular theft. I'm almost done. Questions or comments, please get them in. Alternatively, if you wish, say that the baraisa is referring to an unarmed bandit and is in accordance with the opinion of Rabba bar Avu, who reversed the opinions and teaches as follows. How does a renter pay? Rabbi Meir says he has the same liability as a paid bailee, whereas Rabbi Yehuda says he has the same liability as an unpaid bailee. Therefore, even if this baraisa is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, It does not provide support for Rav Yosef's opinion. Rabbi Zera chimes in. Rabbi Zera says, even without reversing the opinions, it is possible to explain that the Baraisa does not provide support for Rav Yosef's opinion by saying as follows. With what are we dealing here? We are dealing with a case where the renter states the claim that the deposit was taken by an armed bandit, and so he could have absolved himself by taking an oath. But afterward, it is found that it was taken by an unarmed bandit. That's a robber. On account of this, the bandit pays the double payment to the renter, and no conclusive proof is brought as to whether one who found a lost item has the status of a paid or an unpaid bailee. After all that, we have not determined that question. Tune in tomorrow for the continuation. Okay, let's take a few questions or comments. On Bava Kamma 57. Okay. Bill, what position is the finder who became an oath breaker in? Says Bill, up a famous creek without a paddle. We would hope so, right? The false oath taker. Right, the false oath taker, right? You're calling him an oath breaker. But yeah, I mean, we're not going to have that much pity on the one who lies in order to absolve himself of responsibility. Agreed. Karen, for the bailee returning the object to the owner's garden, are there any parallels to the rules for delivering a get where it is put in the wife's courtyard? Excellent, analogy and association. So yes, exactly. So when we were in Tractate Gittin, we were seeing that when is a woman divorced, right? When the husband hands her a get. Well, maybe she doesn't want to take the get. So when is it considered that he has delivered the get to her? And one of the possibilities was when it is placed in her domain. Now, divorce documents is not typically something that thieves and porch pirates are running around trying to get their hands on. So you might say that there's, it's acceptable to just, put the get on her property where it's known to be her property, even if it's not totally secured. Maybe, right? Maybe. That would not serve as a proof that when you're returning a lost object that has value and that thieves might want to get their hands on, it would not be sufficient to just put it, on the property if that property is not secure in some way. And now we were talking about also there has to be some expectation that the owner will be around, right? You can't, if it's just going to put it on his porch and, he left the country, he's not coming back for 6 months. Can you really say that you returned the property? Now, that's a situation where if that guy's going to be away for 6 months and you're going to have to watch his property for 6 months, like if it's his animal, the Torah has obligated you in a big way. You're going to have to feed that animal for 6 months that you weren't expecting to have to deal with. Does the owner owe you the money that you spent feeding his animal while it was in your care? I believe so, yes. I mean, we'll get to the actual laws of returning lost objects later. Here, we were just talking about, in terms of we're talking about damages. And we were saying, what is the obligation of safeguarding your animal so that you would be exempt if your animal gets away and eats or tramples your neighbor's property? And while we were on the subject of what is a level of safeguarding, we got into the laws of paid bailees and unpaid bailees, renters and borrowers, and degree of safeguarding, and somebody returning a lost object. We're not going to exhaustively, sort of come to an understanding of this area of the law when really we were talking about when is somebody exempt from paying damages for his animal eating or trampling. Joseph says, is returning to a lost and found sufficient? What a good question. I mean, There's a lot, right? Again, we're not doing exhaustively figure out this area of the law, right? Returning lost objects. If, for example, you're leaving the country, right? You got a plane to catch. You found this item. You'd like to return it. Like, it's just not going to happen if you get on that plane and take it with you. So how do you absolve yourself of responsibility? Like, when you're talking about a lost and found, what are you really talking about? For example, can you take it to the local rabbi who is trusted, in that town, and make it the rabbi's problem? Or maybe the rabbi will assign it to his assistant, and they'll figure it out. So that sort of functions like a lost and found. Or are you, like there's an actual, just like a shelf, like at most golf courses, there's like a lost and found bin, right? Where people, forget shirts and towels and club head covers and things like that. And people who find it, like they just dump it in the bin. And every now and then an employee of the golf course will go through the bin and see if any of these objects have name tags on them. Mostly it's just lost and found, and it's just the expectation that someone who lost will go to the lost and found. It's not that anyone is making it his business to return things from the lost and found. It's just that's a place where, people who lost might be lucky enough to find what was turned in. But what it seems like is that the Torah obligation to return lost items goes far beyond that, right? Like the Torah has said it is your problem. Right, that your neighbor's lost property is your problem. And within reason, it becomes like your obligation to take care of it and do what can be done to get it back to the owner. And so in that sense, just leaving it at a lost and found, probably does not fulfill the obligation. And finally, Sharon, if the unarmed bandit has martial arts skills, is he still unarmed? My hands are registered as lethal weapons with the FBI. I think that's a great question. I don't know. I mean, I would certainly say that such a person is different than one who doesn't have those skills, right? His hands really are weapons in a way that another person's hands are not. Does the victim of this robbery know that? Right? And so is he being confronted by a known karate man, who has hurt people in the past? Are we talking about like the neighborhood bully who we know punches people in the face? And so maybe we consider him like an armed bandit. Or maybe he's just like a skinny guy who says, yeah, my hands are armed, and my hands are considered lethal weapons. Give me your money. And then later that guy will say, well, I was just lying. I mean, I didn't have a gun, and I was trying to steal something so I could eat lunch, but I wasn't an armed bandit. I should only be convicted of robbery, not armed robbery. It's a good question. I don't know the answer. That's what I've got for us today. With God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow night, 7:30-ish, maybe a little earlier, after Shabbos ends here in Los Angeles. So I pray that you and all of Israel and all the world will have a peaceful, uplifting, rejuvenating, refreshing Shabbos, that we should hear only good news after Shabbos, and that we should be one large step closer to peace.